What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Jakecast. I'm your host, Jacob, and well, the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James have been eliminated from the 2021 NBA playoffs by the Phoenix Suns. How did this happen? What does this mean for the Lakers, the Suns, and the rest of the NBA? In this episode, we will get into that as well as a matchup preview between the Milwaukee Bucks and Brooklyn Nets before tip-off this evening. Before we begin, I want to share that all of my podcasts can be found on my website, TheJakecast.com, in addition to all of my blogs. Earlier this week, I did a blog about fan behavior in the NBA and how crazy it has been. Some of the fan behavior and their actions have just been boggling my mind, so be sure to check that out. Now, let's get into today's podcast. Oh, have the mighty have fallen. LeBron James has just experienced his first-round series defeat in the NBA playoffs at the hands of the Phoenix Suns. Now, this series is very interesting for multiple reasons. Number one, the momentum switched between the two teams quite frequently during the series. Phoenix ended up grabbing Game 1, albeit with Chris Paul getting injured, but people were now putting respect on the Suns' name. The Suns, they entered the series as a 2 seed, but they were not the favorite. The media, everybody I talked to, even myself included, thought the Lakers were going to prevail in the series. I just didn't think the Suns had enough size to really contend with LeBron and AD, and they were just going to have free reign at the basket, which they did at Game 2 and Game 3, and it looked like they were taking control of the series. However, what seems to be a very frequent occurrence happened again in Game 4 when AD got injured. He messed up his groin when he hyperextended his knee, and the Lakers were not the same since. Watching Game 5 and Game 6 of this series was so hard. I mean, watching it from the Suns' perspective, it was awesome. I mean, the Suns were moving the ball. Devin Booker was making every shot, driving to the basket at will. He was amazing. He was the best player in Game 5 and Game 6 easily. But if you were a Lakers fan, I feel bad for you. That was some of the worst basketball I have watched this season, and I am a Wizards fan. So I have seen some putrid basketball this season. LeBron James was clearly hurt. I mean, he was not driving to the basket at all. It took him up until, I would say, towards the end of the second quarter, Game 6, to really go full LeBron mode. He was clearly injured. He really just turned into a perimeter player and was deferring a lot. But with that Lakers team that they had out there, you can't really defer if you're LeBron because everybody else was deferring. You really can't put the game in the hands of Markieff Morris, KCP, Caruso, Kuzma, THC. And really the only chance the Lakers had was if they just shot the lights out from 3 and somehow Devin Booker was cold or they were just clamping the Suns, but there was just none of that in Game 5 or Game 6. And NBA fans are doing what they do best and overreacting about every little thing. We got to put it in perspective. The Phoenix Suns were a much better team than this version of the Los Angeles Lakers. The Suns were a 2 seed for a reason, and I feel like people aren't giving them the credit they deserve, and they're more focusing on LeBron and the Lakers and their faults, which is expected. LeBron's obviously the face of the league, so they should talk about him, but we cannot discredit what the Suns just did. Even with Chris Paul hampered by injury, players that I didn't expect to show up for the Suns ultimately did show up. Ayton had a monstrous series, and he really impressed me in Games 2 and Game 3. Jay Crowder got hot later in the series, and Cam Payne was providing a spark off the bench that I didn't think that he was capable of. And Devin Booker, man, you got to put some respect on his name. He struggled a little bit for his standards in the early part of the series, but Game 5 and Game 6 was some of the best basketball I think I've seen him play. Especially the first half and the first quarter of Game 6. Oh my goodness. Devin Booker was not missing out there. I think he had like 5 threes in the first quarter or some crazy stat like that, and they weren't rattling in. They were tough shots, and they were just nothing but net. You couldn't have shot them any better. Game 5 and Game 6 were over probably midway through the first quarter. The Lakers, it was very hard to watch. They just couldn't buy a basket. Their offense was very stagnant, and the Suns were playing wonderful defense. I was really surprised to see Anthony Davis suit up at all for Game 6 with a groin injury. That's not something that you could wrap up or massage to make better for a game or two. It takes time. It's different than other injuries. So when I saw Devin Booker have him on an ISO and he drove to the basket, I knew Anthony Davis was not going to last. And he only lasted a couple minutes in the first quarter, but he should not have been out there at all. And I know Anthony Davis is injury prone, but I think it got into his head and what everybody was saying about him online and that the Lakers needed him. He really wanted to be out there, but at the end of the day, a groin injury is not something that you could play about. And if he did, in fact, re-injure it, which it doesn't look like he did, thankfully, but if he did re-injure it, he could be looking at a much longer timetable for that to actually heal. And one final thing on the Lakers, they needed a break. They've been playing basketball for what seems like the entire year, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the two teams that made the finals last year in the bubble ended up not having as good a season as they thought they would. I believe the number I saw was 73 days that they actually had in the offseason before this season started, which is just not enough time for NBA players to heal, to rest mentally and physically. So I really wasn't surprised to see the Heat fall flat on their face in the first round to the Bucks. Maybe I was a little more surprised about the Lakers because they have LeBron James and they're the actual NBA champion. But if you look at it from a neutral perspective and you take players out of it, 73 days is just not enough time. I think the Lakers will be back next season to contend for a championship. Father Time is undefeated, but I'm going to give LeBron James the benefit of the doubt and say that he was injured and that he can come back from this. But the Lakers, they really need a retool. The Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder signings have not worked out as they expected to. And the Lakers, they need to upgrade their three-point shooting. They're not a good three-point shooting team. And if you watch Game 5 and Game 6, that's what really killed the Lakers. They couldn't match what Phoenix was outputting with the amount of threes they were making. And that's why Game 5 and Game 6 were over midway through the first quarter. Now, if we look at the playoffs, Denver is going to be facing off against Phoenix in the next round, which should be a great series. I'm really looking forward to how Jokic plays. Jokic, the frontrunner for the NBA MVP, he toyed with the Blazers, especially in the closeout game. And it was really interesting to me to watch because the Blazers, they clearly had the guard advantage with Damian Lillard and McCollum because the Nuggets were ending up starting like Campazzo and Austin Rivers, but it didn't even seem to matter. And it's going to be the same thing in this series. The Suns obviously have the guard advantage with Booker and Chris Paul. So I'll be very interested to see how this series plays out. And the Jazz, they finished off the Grizzlies, and now they're waiting for the winner of the Mavs-Clippers series, which I do not want to even get into. Every time I think the Mavs or Clippers are gaining an advantage, it just goes the other way, and the other team wins. So I would say I do like Boban in the lineup. I think is a good wrinkle that the Mavs put in there, but I'm not even going to go into it. Like I said, we could just watch Game 7 and we'll react to it afterwards to see if the Clippers advance or the Mavs advance. But all in all, I have enjoyed that series quite a bit. It's been very interesting. Momentum has shifted quite a bit in that series, so I'm looking forward to the conclusion of that series. But back to the Suns, this might be Chris Paul's best and final chance to secure a ring. The Lakers, the prohibited favorite, even as a 7 seed by many people, are now out. They should be feeling pretty good about themselves after knocking out the Lakers, the defending champs from last season, and they're starting to play the best basketball I've seen them play this season at the most critical time. My prediction for the series is probably going to be Phoenix in 6. I think Jokic will be a tough opponent for them, but I just think the Suns are going to be too much to handle, and unlike the Blazers, they have a little bit more talent, they're a little better coached, so I think the Suns will be making it to the Western Conference Finals. Now, switching over to the Eastern Conference, we have a series that I've been looking forward to since the playoffs have started. The Brooklyn Nets will be facing off against the Milwaukee Bucks in the semifinals. This might even be better than the conference finals. I think this series is going to be an absolute bloodbath. Whoever comes out of this series is not going to be the same team that they were. It is going to be an absolute fight to the end. The Nets probably have the most talent in the NBA right now, but we can't forget that KD, Kyrie, and Harden have only played a couple games together, and they looked good against the Celtics, but the Celtics were clearly undermanned in that series, and the Nets easily won it. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Nets react when they are actually challenged. What if Milwaukee wins this first game? How will they react? Or does it not even matter because they're just so talented that it doesn't matter that they haven't played together? Past 2 seasons, Milwaukee has been a favorite entering into the playoffs, and they've fallen flat on their face. This season, they're entering in as kind of like an under-the-radar team, which is hard to say considering Milwaukee has Giannis, who is a 2-time back-to-back MVP. but I do not see many people talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. All the talk is with the Nets or the 76ers. People are kind of forgetting about the Bucks. And the Bucks are a much better team than they were the past 2 years. Eric Bledsoe is just not good enough, and Drew Holiday is a much better player, and he's probably one of the best players to be in the series, considering they're going to be going against KD, Kyrie, James Harden, and Drew Holiday is one of the best defenders we have in the NBA today. This series is going to be tough, and I could see it going either way. I believe the winner of this series will ultimately be favored to make the NBA Finals in the next round. The Sixers are in an interesting situation as Joel Embiid's health is up in the air. It looks like he has a torn meniscus, but they're considering him day to day. So I think it's going to be a tough ask to see the 76ers compete against the Nets or the Bucks if they do make it to the next round. And the Hawks, I think their playoff inexperiences will catch up to them if they do make the conference finals. The Nets and the Bucks are just too experienced of teams to let a team that has no experience in the playoffs beat them and make to the finals. So I think the winner of the Bucks and the Nets series will be favored to make the finals. Now, for my prediction of the series, honestly, I could see it going either way, but I'm not going to duck the question. I'm going to have Nets in 7. I think the Bucks are going to go out to a quick start in the series and maybe snag game 1 or game 2, considering they just swept the Miami Heat. But I just think the Nets, they have too much firepower, even for the Bucks to handle, and I think that they'll win in 7. Would I be surprised if the Bucks won? No. Like I said, this series is going to be a bloodbath, and I think the winner of this series will make the NBA Finals and might even be favored in winning the title. My biggest question with the Nets is who takes the final shot? What if they're down 1 or 2 in this series? Who's taking that shot? And to be honest with you, I don't even know the answer to that question. All 3 players have taken and made big shots throughout their career, but it's going to be interesting to see which superstars defer to the other one in this situation and if they can put their ego aside for the betterment of the team. But that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I want to hear what you guys have to say. What are your NBA playoff predictions, as well as what would you do if you were the Lakers in the offseason? No, you guys are not getting Damian Lillard, but you can tweet your responses to me. My Twitter is @TheJakecast, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.